Welcome to Friday Beyond Spotlights. I am Patrick Tsang, a local Hong Kong businessman, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. Our guest today is Natalie Chung, climate advocate and social entrepreneur and sustainability leader, driving change in Asia. Natalie is also serving at advisory councils of the Hong Kong government, including the Council for Carbon Neutrality and Sustainable Development and the Green Tech Fund Assessment Committee, offering youth perspectives to authorities. Welcome to Friday Beyond Spotlights, Natalie.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for having me on the show.
So Natalie, many of us still remember the extreme weather that affected Hong Kong last September. As a climate advocate, what do you think we should all learn from such events?
Yeah, exactly, Patrick. That's a great question. Well, today we are already experiencing extreme heat, a lot of heat waves coming near summertime. And last year, we still remember all the coastal flooding, storm surges, and even inland urban flooding. And all these events reveals that Hong Kong is not as resilient as we have thought. And we are also a very vulnerable city, being a lowland coastal city with subtropical monsoon climate. So I think what we can learn is that the government needs to start building in robustness and resilience within our city planning. In the past, no matter it's the private sector or the public sector, we've always been looking at climate change mitigation, which is decarbonizing our economy.
So the solutions come as natural solutions as well as man-made solutions?
Yeah, so there are both nature-based solutions as well as some of the engineering solutions. And I believe we need a combination of both, not just one. For instance, nature-based solutions might take longer time to realize. Like when you're growing new mangroves forests, it may take up to like 20, 30 years to mature. But then when we're using some of the seawalls, we also need to integrate some of the nature components in so that they will not be a case of maladaptation.
It takes a collective effort to tackle the challenges posed by climate change. Natalie, what do you think each party, government, businesses, and communities can do to address this big and vital challenge?
I think climate change is actually one of the most challenging problems we've faced by humanity, and it requires a collective effort by all these different sectors. And I believe cross-sector collaboration is key to solving this issue. In terms of the government, of course, high top-down policy is needed. But at the same time, the civil society has so much power in terms of building up our bottom-up capacities. Working in the government councils myself, I realized that sometimes government want to push forward a certain policy, but then they also need that kind of wider public support in order to have that window of opportunity to realize different policy changes. And in terms of the business sectors, there are also some of the points we call sensitive intervention points, where in a complex systems, when we're able to enact one certain policy or giving different incentives, we're able to trigger some positive feedback loop that can bring the flywheel effect. For example, having more renewable energy, we can also speed up electrification of transport, both public and private transportation. So these are things that we need to look more closely at because time is running out.
You are also, as you mentioned, a member of the Council for Carbon Neutrality and Sustainable Development and the deputy convener of the Subcommittee on Youth and Capacity Building. Do these roles help inspire collective action towards a more sustainable future?
As part of the Council for Sustainable Development, in 2019, we did this public engagement exercise where we actually distributed a lot of surveys to general Hong Kong citizens through online and also through telephone, and to collect their feedback on whether Hong Kong should reach net zero and whether we should set a more ambitious target. And in the end, we found majority of the public actually supports our city to decarbonize and reach net zero by 2050. And that was what was adopted by the then chief executive into our policy address. So I think the council itself gives more sort of public grounding to the policies that the government wishes to make. At the same time, hosting a lot of public forums in the communities.
Natalie, the government is also investing heavily in turning Hong Kong into a greener city. I know you also serve as a member of the Green Tech Fund Assessment Committee. Can you tell us more about the Green Tech Fund and what are the most interesting projects it has funded?
A university research team is using something with waste plastic, turning them into noise barrier at highways. Normally, when we're thinking of building noise barriers at highways, we just think about how it can reduce noise pollution, but we never think about the energy use and raw material use. And now we can use waste plastic, a mix of them, different types and we don't need to separate it. We can save cost. So I think it's generating a lot of co-benefits. And of course, there are projects that utilize second life car battery. As we know, there are lots of EVs on the streets right now. But then even when the EV batteries need to retire, they still have around 60–70% of the capacity. So it would be a great waste if we just throw it into the landfill. Well, instead of that, we can use those batteries to use as a backup generator for some of the older buildings in Hong Kong that does not have enough voltage for charging the cars. So we can now use these batteries as a battery storage for charging, which can extend its life and also expand its impact.
Natalie, you also founded Fair Sustainability Education, which is a startup that utilizes ecotourism and nature-based experiential learning to inspire behavioral change. Could you share more your founding story with us, your impact model at Fair, and vision on climate education in Hong Kong and beyond?
I started Fair Sustainability Education since 2015, but back then I was still a first-year university undergrad. And we thought of different solutions to reduce Hong Kong's carbon footprint. And one of them is actually by tackling aviation emissions, because we know that Hong Kong people love traveling abroad, but at the same time, it brings about a heavy carbon cost. Because each of the flash flight, like a short flight, for example, round trip from Hong Kong to Japan, is around half a ton of emissions already, which is around 20% of our annual carbon footprint. So by utilizing these figures, we wanted to figure out a solution to attract more Hong Kong people to stay locally, to explore the biodiversity here as well as in the wider Greater Bay Area, because there are so many nature parks and spots that we have yet to be explored. And in Hong Kong, we have 70% of our land as greenbelt, so that's a lot of natural resources for us to learn from. And starting from then, in 2018, we officially registered as a social enterprise, as a private company, and we started accepting more eco-tours for the public, as well as for private corporate and schools.
So Natalie, other than being a local leader, you're also selected as the sole Hong Kong representative at the Antarctic climate expedition that took place last year. Can you share with us the experience of driving such a conversation on an international level?
The Antarctic Climate Expedition was led by Dr. Sylvia Earle. She's a National Geographic explorer in residence and also one of my planetary heroes. She was so inspiring, and she led us to explore Antarctica in her lens through her research in marine biology and oceans research. So in the expedition, we were hoping to champion some climate ocean resolutions, because traditionally we've been focused a lot on land-based solutions like growing more trees, preserving the forest, but we have been ignoring ocean's immense role in controlling climate change. For instance, it's producing oxygen for us. The ocean is absorbing around 20–30% of all carbon emissions. It's nature's largest carbon sink. So if we're destroying the oceans, we're also destroying the climate at the same time.
Hong Kong is widely known as the bridge between the East and the West. What kind of role do you think Hong Kong can play in advancing the sustainability conversation?
In the past, I used to think we don't have a lot of leverage because, for instance, we are part of the China party at the UN climate change conferences, and we will not have separate negotiation representatives at these stages. But then I realized we can also play a more influencing role within the whole Greater Bay Area and within China, as well as into international stage. In terms of green finance, we are bringing in a lot of the fundings, and the government also issued green bonds where even smallholders like us can purchase and can join in the green movement. And in terms of tech, we're also at the hub of East and West, as you said. We're bringing in a lot of external talents, and mainland's leading battery storage companies and EV companies are also starting to set up their headquarters in Hong Kong. These are some of the emerging trends that we can look out for, and we can also play this role in bridging the kind of money with the tech and with such a great legal system with rule of law that all the companies feel comfortable in setting up their headquarters or branches here to bring in the technologies to different parts of the world.
So Natalie, how do you empower young people to protect the future of our planet?
The most important thing to empower them is to inspire them. And through inspiration, we're able to empower them into doing something bigger and more for the rest of the youths. Because through the inspiration process, we're able to bring up the curiosity to learn more about the environment and to learn about the emerging issues that we need to face.
Well, we actually have someone who really wants to meet you.
Oh, great.
So Natalie, this is Isabella Kong. Isabella is a geographer. She's a recent graduate of Cambridge University and now works as an environmental consultant.
Great, nice to meet you, Isabella.
Nice to meet you. I've been looking up to your work for such a long time, and I'm really passionate about the environment. Right now I'm helping companies implement and design sustainability strategies, and I was wondering, what can I do to inspire more companies to do more in environmental, social, and governance?
Great, it's great to hear what you're doing and putting your knowledge to good use. I think there are two perspectives. The first one is risk management and the second is innovation. On risk management, we're seeing more extreme weather events impacting Hong Kong and rest of the world. For instance, heat waves will affect productivity of workers, and some of the typhoons would lead to store outlet closures. And these are all impacting the bottom line of businesses. So when businesses are able to see these positive impacts that brings to their economy, bring to the continuity of business, so I think this is also an incentive for businesses to work more on ESG.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your inspiring words.
Welcome back to Friday Beyond Spotlights. We have with us today Natalie Chung, climate advocate and social entrepreneur. Who is Natalie Chung behind the spotlights? In this show and tell segment, Natalie will show us an item that has special meaning or significance in shaping her into who she is today. So Natalie, show us a special item that you have with us today.
Yeah, so this is my show and tell item. It's a mountain made by my mother for my graduation as one of the gifts. It's also like a pin where I can pin it on my,
very
on
special.
my graduation gown. So it says Natalie, which is my name, and I think it holds a special meaning in my heart because I've always been a big hiker, and my parents started this passion of mine because they started bringing me to different mountains and trails since I was young. We did barbecues at different country parks and also walking around, looking at the monkeys. So I love the mountains a lot, and I think the mountains and the terrains of Hong Kong represents myself and my journey. And I mean, life is always like hiking. There is uphill moments, there are downhill moments. Eventually, I think it's all worthwhile when we go to the peak and we see the amazing scenery of Hong Kong. And it's also what fuels my climate passion from the journey. I think sometimes we feel very hopeless in the climate adventures because we think that the government is not listening, we think that we're not doing enough. But ultimately, we see how different people are benefiting from the work that we're doing, and this keeps us going. And the beauty of the community, the beauty of the scenery are able to fuel us and keep us more hopeful.
So Natalie, your story is intimately linked with growing up in Hong Kong and having very supportive parents, right? Who was always taking you to different trails and hikes.
I think if not for my parents, I would not have been on the climate journey because it's not a very traditional pathway. Especially back in the days, maybe like 10-ish years ago, Hong Kong was still very much a finance center. Everyone thinks that having a finance career or law career is the most stable livelihood for yourself. And when I decided to choose geography for my major for my undergrad, I remembered my class teacher actually took me outside of the classroom and said, "Why are you choosing this subject? You should be doing law instead." And I was a little bit traumatized, as a little kid. I thought, was I making the right decision? And I mean, now I'm doing pretty well and ESG becomes a hit topic in Hong Kong. And some people would say to me that, wow, you're so opportunistic. You're choosing this right space to be in, the growing space. But I think it was not because of that. It was because of my lifelong passion that drove me to where I am today. I think what is the most persistent is your own passion and doing what you're passionate about, and that's where you will shine the most.
Natalie, you're a social entrepreneur. How does this differ from regular entrepreneurship?
I think it's actually 99% the same. The only difference is that we keep at least 1/3 of our profits within the business, and we don't share dividends. So for me and my co-founder, we never really take, like profits from the business. We keep all the profits within our company so it can keep growing, and we can use the money to hire more team members, to expand the team, and to do more fascinating projects. And most recently, we also started a partnership with Disney, which is super exciting because I've always been a huge Disney fan. And because 2024 was the 100th anniversary of the entire Disney group, and I wanted to do something on education that is related to environment. So we brainstormed this concept with them where we bring school students within Disney to play different of the attractions. But during the attractions, for example, Jungle River Cruise, we would teach them biodiversity, the importance of preserving different wild animals and how it linked to, for example, the Convention of Biological Diversity. So I think there are lots of opportunities, like even within Hong Kong, like how do we bring in different parties? An amusement park can also be a platform for environmental and biodiversity education, which is something that we rarely think about. So I think it's important to keep innovating as a social entrepreneur to find that common social good that Disney also wants to serve, but we also want to bring more people to understand climate, to understand biodiversity. So I think in social entrepreneurship, maybe we need to balance more sides, like not just the profit side, but also social impact side.
Natalie, you're a leader, an activist, an innovator, a writer, a speaker, and an explorer. What's next on your plate?
What's next for me? I want to become a more eloquent storyteller, especially telling the stories of local communities to the wider public, and in combining those traditional wisdoms in our modern climate solutions. Most recently, I worked with a media company in Hong Kong to produce a show featuring Fiji and their climate solutions. So we went on this mini field trip to Fiji and to understand how their villagers are building something called the nature-based seawalls, which are, they're using some boulders combining with sufficient grass so that they can use those soil to hold the boulders together instead of using concrete. So it saves resources and also combining glacier elements in preventing sea level rise and intruding into the communities, which is some indigenous wisdom that I think even Hong Kong can look at. Like when we're planning our cities, we should also be looking at these nature-based solutions that are able to connect with the communities and able to reduce the intensity of extreme weather events.
So it's wonderful to know that while you are out there working with other countries, you can also bring their know-how and technology back to Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we've been missing a lot is in the past, we've always been looking up to very developed, advanced cities. For example, how to further increase our electrification rates. But we're starting to neglect a lot of the hidden, villages in Hong Kong. For example, in the Hakka villages, I've always been visiting and learning from their villages. How did they withstand these typhoons 100 years ago? I was with National Geographic in Angkor Wat last year, and we were also thinking of, well, how did Angkor Wat withstand all these changes in sea levels in thousands of years and remaining intact? There must be some magic within these communities that they're able to, observe the weather, they're able to do things in advance rather than just fixing the problem. Because in modern days, we tend to, when something breaks, we fix it afterwards rather than building something that's more resilient and robust in the first place. So I think this kind of mindset is something that we should think more of in our city planning and our sustainable development.
So if there's one change you can make in our society right away to make Hong Kong more sustainable, what would that be?
That would be forward thinking. The mindset of looking into the future, predicting how this thing will evolve in 100 years' time, in 1,000 years' time, and building something that lasts and building something that suits our future's needs.
On the flip side, what will happen to Hong Kong if we do nothing about climate change now?
Well, it's pretty obvious. So last year, we already saw how floodwater went into a shopping mall. That was quite interesting because some of my friends were working in that area and they were saying how some of their bosses were saying, oh, like why didn't you do a proper climate risk assessment on that property? But then they realized that, oh, because that was not a coastal property, so they thought it would be low risk, but in the end, it was even higher risk. If we're not acting against climate change, we will be exposed to so many different risks that would also bring about financial loss. So ultimately, it would harm our economy, but also the public health crisis, because as we see, COVID was actually also aggravated by climate change. With air pollution, COVID mortality rate would further increase. So if we're able to address climate change, we can address a lot of these multifaceted issues that are at the periphery of climate change. And it's not just solving one problem, but we're solving a lot of different problems brought by neoliberalism.
So how would you make Hong Kong a better place?
I would make Hong Kong a better place by providing more nature-based learning experiences for the underprivileged groups and grassroots marginalized communities. Because I think nature is the agent that can empower all our communities and bring us together.
Now we've come to our fun rapid fire segment where we get more up close and personal with Natalie. So Natalie, I will fire some rapid fire questions to you. There's no right or wrong answer. Just answer what comes to your mind. So Natalie, what's your favorite comfort food?
Yunnan crossed bridge noodles.
Your favorite sport?
Hiking and scuba diving.
Your favorite music?
Cantopop.
Favorite movie?
Oppenheimer.
The last thing you searched online?
How to learn Python on my phone.
Favorite place to travel to?
Pacific Island countries.
What's your first job?
Kadoorie Conservation China.
If you're going to pick one word to describe yourself, what would that be?
Passionate.
Who do you admire most?
Dr. Sylvia Earle and Dr. Rebecca Lee.
Any hidden talent that we don't know about?
I can do ribbon dance and flips. And I also have grade 8 in Chinese painting.
What's a talent that you wish you had?
I wish I could teleport.
What would be the title of your autobiography?
It would be Serendipitous Horizons.
Nicest thing someone has said to you?
When my Oxford classmates told me that I smile a lot at class and brought positive energy.
What's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is my loved ones leaving me.
Any misconceptions about you?
That I'm very hardworking, but I actually procrastinate a lot.
What's the advice that you would give to your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that I should focus more on what I do rather than what I want to become.
What legacy do you wish to leave behind?
I wish to leave behind a planet that is habitable and equitable for everyone.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us on Friday Beyond Spotlights. See you next time. Thank you so much.